All right. Welcome to the Domestic Draft
Man.
Podcast. I'm Evan Bierman here with Dan Slowick. Dan, I see you have a beer. I also have a beer. But today we're not going to be talking about those. We're just going to be talking about Barley&Sword Brewing Company, catching up with Mike Howell. He's joining us again today. If you're not familiar with Barley&Sword, they were founded in San Diego in 2023. You can find them online. Barley&Sword.com is their website. It's got their beer menu. All those good things. Mike, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you very much, gents. Really appreciate it.
We saw some interesting news, some celebratory news on your social media handles, I think in the last 48 hours that
a bottle of champagne. Yeah.
You quit your job. What's going on? You want to talk about what just happened?
Yeah. So I have worked for the Department of the Navy for the last, since 2018, however many years that is. COVID was really long.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed what I did, supporting the Navy, supporting the troops. I myself am a veteran. I was a sailor, and being able to be in that position was really awesome. But I had an opportunity arise to be able to step away from that and move into operating the brewery full time. And so I took the plunge.
Congratulations.
Awesome, yeah, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you for your service as well. So, the Navy is a big part of what Barley&Sword, was built upon, right? And so, it's been a couple of years since you've been on the show. I think the last time we talked to you was right before you guys were opening too. So I feel like we got you right before you guys, started. And then now as you're going full time. Would you mind just kind of telling the listeners a little bit about Barley&Sword, how it was founded, and some of your brewing principles, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Barley&Sword Brewing Company was an idea that was kind of marinating in the back for a really long time. It came to fruition during a D&D session with a couple of my buddies. I had just come back from visiting my grandparents and my cousin in Eastern Oregon. My cousin is a brewer who got that job kind of after a little bit of prodding from me. And while I was in town, she asked if I wanted to do a collaboration. As a home brewer, I was like, yeah, sure. I'd love to work in a professional brewery.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. I came back during D&D talking to my friends about it. And they were like, well, let's open up a brewery. And
part of every good D&D session. Yeah,
absolutely. So in a matter of a month, we had an LLC, and a month and a half after that, we had the lease on our location, and then we opened up less than 4 months later.
Wow,
and
that was a really quick turnaround. Yeah,
yeah, it was. My brand new girlfriend, now fiance, looks back on that time with a lot of raised eyebrows.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that too. Wow, big moves for Mike since we last saw you.
Absolutely.
And looking back, I love coming to your place. I stop by any chance I get. I just really enjoy the styles of beer that you guys have and the feel and comfort you've built within that space to kind of customize it and make it your own. Why did you decide to kind of emphasize on the traditional beers and brewing recipes and even like styles and casking? Pouring out beers right out of the cask. Like, why was that the focus? Where did that come from?
So I'm a bit of a history buff, and I'm also a bit of a purist. I like to do things as they were originally intended. Beer has gone through a lot of change and innovation in the damn near 10,000 years that humans have been making beer in various forms. But I feel that beer in and of itself is kind of a staple of society. And so by focusing on the origins of the styles, the time period that those styles became a thing, and then taking that as a point of education into the modern beer drinker, I want to be able to do that. I ran a Viking Age living history organization here in San Diego for about a decade, and historical education was really, really important. And like beer, the Viking Age is very misunderstood. You think horned helmets, raiding and pillaging, and raping and murdering, and that's it. Well, really, in actuality, they were the most technologically advanced culture during their time, their heyday. And I think that beer kind of deserves that attention. I think that it's important to recognize that the reason that the Helles Lager exists is because Germany got irritated with the Czechs developing the Czech Pilsner. And so they developed something in concert and as a way to kind of answer back. And so providing that historical education and providing beer in a way that it was originally intended, even in today's modern drinking society, especially in San Diego, hop forward and new and innovative, we can kind of create that environment by taking a little bit of a step back.
It sounds hard. It sounds like it's the hard path.
It's incredibly hard. I heard someone reference it as it was like forced diversity.
Yeah.
Or forced adversity. Basically choosing that hard path. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I really don't regret it. I love being able to sit in this space, and ironically, it's a space that's not well populated,
especially out here in San Diego. Yeah, you're very much an original and in a unique space. That's why I keep coming back. I mean, the beers are so good. Just staying on that, the diverse road that you took. Is it the ingredients that's really hard to get, or is it doing the process that's really hard to do? What's the most difficult part of that route that you've taken? Is it the techniques or the ingredients?
It's actually neither.
Okay, never mind then.
Well, I mean, it's a good point. When you're going back to traditional old world style beers, the ingredients are very readily available. It's just a matter of, do you get them from local regional producers or do you go to the source?
Right.
I go to the source. Most of my grain comes from either Germany or England. And that's kind of the long and short of it. My hops are almost exclusively from Europe. Really, it's the technique is no different. The technique for the beers that I brew is way more simpler than a double, triple IPA. I don't have to worry about all those kinds of things. The hardest part is reaching the consumer. It's that hook. The moment that I get somebody in the door and I get a beer in their hand, then I've got them hooked. But it's that I gotta break through that perception of what beer should be.
Yeah. And, it's along the same lines, right? You've been successful enough to the point where you can quit your job now and you can do this full time, like you said. So obviously Barley&Sword has been a smashing success then for the last few years here for you to be able to do that. Would you contribute the fact that when you get somebody in the door, like you said, you can give someone the full history of a certain style of beer? You can talk them through exactly what you did. And it seems like it's this engaging experience. You guys also host tabletop game nights. You talked about D&D being a part of the story and other community events like that. So how important is that social aspect of the Barley&Sword experience? And has that been one of the primary factors that's contributed to the success so far, you'd say?
I would say that it is one of the leading factors, but it is not the biggest factor. Surprisingly, especially to me, distribution has been our biggest boon, and not just outside of the region, but within the region. Because, like I said before, there's a bit of a niche that we're kind of angling into. So we're kind of one of the only ones. Our local distributor is pretty discerning about what they carry as far as styles. We are their only Irish red. Their only red, period. We're their only Hefeweizen. And as such, I'm taking orders every single week to keep beer flowing, my beer floating, specifically old world style beer in San Diego, let alone Southern California. And then today I pushed beer to Portland, Oregon. A week and a half ago, I pushed beer to Boise, Idaho, which is where I'm from. So I got a lot of family that's really excited about that. So we're seeing a lot of desire for these styles, even if it's not necessarily in the tap room. Because, like I said, the Irish Red, the Hefeweizen, they are top sellers here in the tap room, but that extends beyond. And I got to tell you, I had my sights set on displacing a few local legends that kind of fill that space for a couple of those styles. Kicking Smithwick's off a tap in an Irish pub was not on my bingo card.
That's big time.
Yeah.
But we did it.
That's big time. Was this kind of just going back to like being the founder of this company, and you know the passion was a home brewer and it was all about the beer, but now we're getting into the business aspect. Your distribution is going multi-state, regional possibly. Like, what is kind of getting you excited looking to the future? Is it more distribution? Is it going to be looking for your own space? So like as you're growing and now you're full-time, like what are you envisioning? What are some of the dreams and the D&D conversations that you're having now that you already have this brewery?
Yeah, so the Igniter space that we're in, being able to rent the equipment with the space, a huge boon. It's gotten us to where we are. But ultimately, we do have to look at that expansion, that growth. My goal within the next year and a half to 2 years is to be able to shift into our own space with a brewery that I can build out and custom build with increased production to meet the demand not only locally but also with distribution, especially at the rate that we're growing, which directly related into why I stepped away from a full-time job to be able to do this full-time just to meet those production demands. But yeah, production space as well as a satellite tap room. I think that there are some certain communities within San Diego County that would really enjoy our styles of beer, those old world traditional styles. And I would like to be able to set up a satellite tap room in those areas to be able to serve those communities, but also build our brand and get our name out there a little bit more.
Now it's been 2 years, right? There's been a lot of success for sure. You know, we talked before we started recording about something that you walked into this morning, some beer on the floor. We need to know the story behind that. But then, you know, on top of that, what are some of the lessons you've learned kind of along the way?
So one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that there's no use crying over spilled beer.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And no matter what you do, it's going to happen. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like the beer that foams over a little bit in the glass and a little bit goes down the drain. You multiply that by a couple thousand pints and it adds up, but it's just the nature of the beast. It's just the way that it is. Consider it a sacrifice to the beer gods.
There you go. It's a rite of passage.
Exactly. And as time has gone by, I've gotten a little bit more accepting of that. In the beginning, I was very kind of tight-laced about it, and every drop counts. But you have to have a little bit of acceptable loss, as much as it hurts, as the brewer. But yes, as you mentioned, Evan, this morning I walked into the one of the worst possible situations after waking up at 3 a.m. today, thinking,
not nervous about second day on the job.
Well, it was I forgot something.
A no shit moment. We don't like those.
Yeah, I was here until 10:30 last night, canning a beer to get ready for this distribution order today. and I had pushed my carbonation, my CO2 up a little bit high in one of my tanks. I forgot to turn it off. So when I walked in today, I found about 60 gallons of beer on the floor.
Oh,
Is the
Which was
initial panic, or is it all right? Let's start cleaning this up.
it is very much well, this is a mess.
There's beer everywhere.
We got to take care of it
Yeah.
because I have other shit to do.
yeah.
And are you open?
So-
Were you open today to the public?
Yeah, we opened up at 2 today.
Okay.
But I got here at 7:45 a.m. So I
Plenty of
dealt
time
with
to
that,
clean it up.
and while I was dealing with that, I was washing kegs and getting kegs ready to be filled. I think I filled and washed a grand total of about 40 kegs today.
Oh, man. God bless you. That's great.
Us as the consumers, yeah, we really appreciate.
Yeah, those
that.
are the things you don't see, right? I mean, that stuff that's not just you guys that happens to. That's happened to probably every brewery at some point or
Yeah,
another.
absolutely.
And you don't see that as the consumer, right? So it's important to hear. I feel like,
Yeah, I'm sure people showed up today and it was business as usual, and no one knew that there was 60 gallons of beer on the floor this morning.
Yeah,
100%. I've got, because I was busy with packaging this morning and most of the day, I've got one of my partners swabbing out the cooler right now.
Oh man. So, other things like marketing strategy, I think about, as it's been a couple of years, how has that changed? Have you made any changes to your branding or your your marketing process as far as that goes, or maybe even your business model at
Labels,
this
yeah.
point, labels, that kind of stuff? How has that stuff been shaped? Have customer preferences shaped that at all, or has that all been more, your own marketing strategy has just kind of changed based on what's been successful so far?
Yeah, so from a brand image, we've been really consistent, which is something that I kind of strive for and I really appreciate. I don't like the idea of changing up what the brand is too much. I don't think that really lends a lot of consumer trust if you're constantly modifying a brand. And to that point, our marketing in the form of our brand has developed a lot of desire from consumers of, hey, that poster that you have in the tap room that's also on this can, can I buy that poster? Or do you have a T-shirt with that on it? And we haven't quite developed that product yet from a merchandise perspective, but it's something that we're working towards. And now that I have a little bit more bandwidth to be able to put the mental energy into it, that's something that I definitely want to look into in 2025. But marketing, we have grown in leaps and bounds in the last 6 months. We partnered with a local member of the industry who's kind of developing a little bit of a marketing consulting thing on the side. And he and our cinematographer, filmographer, photographer, whatever you want to call him, they have done some amazing things. They bring some great ideas to the table. They're really open to some of our ideas, and they really honor and respect our brand image. And I feel like we've communicated that to the public really, really well, and have seen growth from a metrics, social media numbers perspective really consistently since August. And it's very hard to tie social media marketing directly into sales, but I do think it's a critical factor in the growth that we have experienced.
And I think as someone who follows your accounts, I've noticed that, and I've been sharing more of your posts with Evan. I think one of your posts as well, your full chain link suit promoting one of your community events of like sword fighting. I don't know if you want to add more detail to that, but this is something you guys do often, right?
Yeah, so we've done 2 events of the night fights, as we call them. Having been in the Viking Age living history sphere, which lends itself to Renaissance fairs and the Society of Creative Anachronism, or SCA. You tend to get to know people. So when you hear people say, "I've got a guy," I've got a guy.
You got a knife guy. You got a sword fighter.
And so we've hosted 2 events, and we have another one coming up on February 15th. Great way to take your date out for Valentine's Day on the 14th, and then come watch a couple of guys beat the living shit out of each other on the 15th.
Balance.
And
Life's
enjoy
all
a great beer while you do it.
It's all about balance.
It's all about balance. But yeah, so we kind of hooked up with a group that does armored mixed martial arts, AMMA.
Of course.
So
these are the things you don't know that are out there. So I
Exactly.
need to know that. Yeah, and I would love to see something like that, by the way, too. So I'm glad.
Can you imagine going and getting a couple drinks and just seeing 2 knights fighting in front of you by the end of the night?
You don't see that in Chicago. You just don't.
It's an absolute blast.
Yeah.
So full plate armor, leather, little bit of chainmail, and steel weapons. And these guys are going out, and they are just going. I mean, full bore, no holds barred.
Local medieval times brought to your doorstep here in San Diego. I grew up right outside of medieval times, but this is right here in our community. Love
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. The biggest difference, it's not choreographed.
That's right.
These guys are fighting to fight. They're fighting to win. It's not, as much as you could put a story to it, it's not a story.
And then we'll get a casino to back it, and people will start making bets, and you'll be Hamul or Pachengo will go ahead and back you.
Once we get our own location and we can build a proper arena, that's not a bad idea.
There we go.
Get some wrestling going on there or something too. But how is the local, the other local breweries around you guys? How have they embraced you guys? How has the rest of the craft beer scene in San Diego supported you along the way so far? Have you had any collaborations with any other breweries to this point?
Yeah, so we've had a number of collaborations over the course of 2024. Notably was Ballast Point. We collaborated for our West Coast IPA. Honestly, it was an interesting collaboration, sitting down with the guys from Ballast and kind of arguing back and forth about our influence, their influence, and really fighting to come to the middle, but in the most collaborative way possible. It was really a beautiful experience. And what we ended up producing was a truly authentic, original West Coast IPA, something that you would have experienced in the late 80s, early 90s as the style was starting to come about. And I think one of the best points of feedback that I've gotten from anybody about that beer was someone going, "Wow, this tastes like the 90s."
That's where my head went too. It's like a retro beer, and I love to hear that, because I feel like that fits in with the history vibe of Barley and Sword as well. So no, I love that was where everyone came. I mean, sometimes you hear about collaborations that are 4 or 5 breweries are involved, and it's like, how much of that, what does that collaborative process look like? And the hope is, from a consumer perspective, that it's every brewery is fighting tooth and nail to get their influence on the beer, just like you said. And so that's exactly what you want to hear, I think, as a consumer.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and I've maintained those relationships since then. And it's because we're in San Diego, it's become one of our staple beers. It's the biggest response I get is, well, that's not a West Coast IPA, it's too dark. Well, this is how West Coast IPAs were when they started.
Let me educate.
Give it a try.
Educate you on that a little bit here.
And beer history is not all way in the past. Beer history is within the last 20 to 30 years. So,
right.
Yeah,
definitely. We'll get a couple more questions before we get you out here, and we'll have some fun ones mixed in there. But Are any of the beers that you brew your baby? Do you have one that's like this is the one I extra care to? I wait around a little longer to make sure everything's a-okay. I know they're all your babies, but if you had to pick a favorite, do you have a favorite?
So yeah, trying to choose your favorite child, right?
Yeah.
Björnberg, our Irish Red, has long been one of my favorite beers. It's one of my favorite styles, especially as a home brewer, where my passion for it really started. And we, in our first year in 2023, we went 3 of 3 rounds at GABF, the Great American Beer Festival, with that beer. The first competition that we ever entered in, but we didn't medal. And so I was like, I am gonna medal with this beer, and so I meddled with it.
There we go.
I messed with the recipe, and I changed it, and I changed it, and I changed it again, and then it became a different beer entirely. And I was like, this is not okay. It's a great beer, but this is not okay. So I changed it back. And then I actually meddled with the beer, and she took gold at the California State Fair last year.
There you go.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Congrats,
it was thank you. It was thrilling. It was thrilling to finally get that recognition for the beer. But what I did is I took it back to the original recipe.
That's your whole MO. That's the back to the basics right there. Who would have thought, right? The meddling leads to a medal.
Exactly. And so that the red and the hef arguably are my 2 babies. Those are the beers that I take the most care for. And unexpectedly, I did not expect this in San Diego. My 2 favorite beers became our 2 biggest beers, in-house and for distro.
Yeah, I buy the half every time I'm in. Every time I'm in, I buy the half because it takes me back to being in Europe and getting a half over there, and just like, okay, it's the closest thing to when you have that feeling. You're at the local kind of establishment and watching pedestrians go by, and you have that kind of perfect beer, and it's like you're looking to replicate that when you come home. And where can you find it? Where can you find it? And it's Barley&Sword. That's where you find it. That's where that happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, that beer almost got me into a fight.
All right, we got to hear that story. What's that about?
Story? Yeah. Is that appropriate? Can we talk about it?
Oh no, it's very appropriate. So for my previous job, I worked in with the Department of the Navy, and I managed combat logistics for ships. So the ships that support the warships. So they deliver bombs, beans, and gas, because you can't kick ass without bombs, beans, and gas.
The 3 Bs, or BBC.
I'm on a call. Whatever. I'm on a podcast, buddy. Can you give me like 5 minutes? Thanks, bud. my 6-year-old. So anyway, as part of my responsibilities with that role, I supported the Rim of the Pacific Maritime Military Exercise. So RIMPAC takes place every 2 years in Hawaii, and acting as the chief of staff for a task force for this exercise, I had Canadian ships under my purview. I had German ships under my purview. Well, the Canadians and the Germans both sailed to San Diego before they went to Hawaii. So I reached out to the captains of those ships, and I said, hey, I would love to meet with you guys before we get out to the island. Let's meet here at my brewery. Let's have a beer. So we meet up and we have a beer, and this is June 13th. Our 1-year anniversary was on June 15th.
Okay.
So June 15th rolls around after having a meeting with these guys, and they really enjoyed the beer. We're having our 1-year anniversary. It's a big day. There's lots of people, like lots of stuff going on. All of a sudden, about 20, maybe 30 German naval officers in their dress whites walk in. Hi, we're looking for someone named Mike. That's me. And I'll show you. They present me with a plaque.
Oh,
They presented me with a plaque
wow.
from the ship.
Yeah, the coat of arms.
Yep. So they gave me this plaque from the ship, and really excited to be working with you. Yada yada yada. They order beers. They start ordering the hef.
It's pretty good.
20-ounce glasses. 20-ounce glasses. Over and over and over again. So the night wears on because it's 1 year anniversary, and we're partying it up. And this German supply officer, as the night is getting pretty late, he says, "So, where do you get your German beer from?"
He thought you were importing it from somewhere else, huh?
I said, "I make it." "No, you don't. Where do you get your German beer from?" I said, "I make it right over there." "No, I lived in Munich for 3 years. While I was at university, I drank this beer every day. Where do you get your German beer from?"
That's like the biggest stamp.
Yeah, that's a
all time.
It's a nice compliment, but yeah, for sure.
I set down my beer and I said, "I make it right there with these hands." And he says, "Oh, you make it?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Wow."
I'll fight you about it. No.
Yeah.
That's when you know, right? That's when you know you're doing it right. When it's like this is home. How did you get my home beer here stateside?
Mm-hmm.
And that that just speaks to the Barley and Sword, right? You get your ingredients from the source, and that's why you do it. That's awesome. That's a great story.
Yeah,
it was great, and I ended up working very closely with that guy for all the entire summer, and it was great. It was absolutely great.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome story for sure. I do have one question, about getting the process started, opening the brewery. We talked about how quick that was. If there was any piece of advice that you'd give yourself, towards the beginning of your guys' journey, what's one thing you would go back and maybe do before you got started, or maybe the answer is, I'm glad we started as fast as we did so that we could jump right in and kind of get going. Is there any lesson learned from the beginning of the journey that you'd give to somebody who might be looking to start their own brewery?
Definitely do your research. There's a lot of things that I didn't properly understand because I did not come from within the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Being a home brewer and jumping straight in head first, I missed a lot of context, and so I would caution anybody that is interested in making that leap to make sure that you really have that understanding of what the industry is, who's who in the zoo, because I didn't. But at the same time, I'm kind of grateful for it because it gives me a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not come into the industry kind of afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of I'm trying to not use too aggressive verbs here, but there's a lot of kowtowing. There's a lot of kind of hero worship. Titans of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
They're people. They're just people too. They have their experiences. They've done the things that they've done, which is something to be discussed and admired and definitely recognized. But they're people too. And I'm afraid that if I had entered the industry or entered into brewery ownership and operation, having been a member of the industry, that I might have gotten caught up in that. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, trying to be one of the big guys rather than just being yourself, like you've talked
Exactly.
about. Yeah,
Exactly. And I'm unapologetically me. I always have been. I don't mince words very often.
I think it shines through in your beer as well. All right, last question before we get you out of here. You stated earlier that you're a history buff. So if you could have if you could have a beer with any historical figure, who would you be sharing that beer with?
Oof. Any historical
don't
figure.
try and cop out with like a couple. We need one answer.
And we want to know what you're talking about. No,
so I, just because of recent conversations in reference to our Helles, I think that I would really enjoy having a beer with Gabriel Settlemare.
educate us.
So Gabriel Settlemare, Gabriel the Younger, he and his brother took over Spaten in Munich from their father when he passed away. There was another partner at the time. They ended up becoming the sole owners of the brewery shortly thereafter. But they, in the early 1800s, were in kind of an interesting period of beer in Europe. The Czechs were developing the Czech Pilsner. The lagers of Germany were pretty well known at the time, and so there was a lot of stuff going on. And he and his brother, in an effort to better understand beer, went to England to understand processes and yeast and fermentation and all this kind of stuff. And they engaged in just espionage, corporate espionage. They had a hollow cane that they stole samples of yeast and beer during brewery tours in the early 1800s, that they then took back to their hotel room and did analysis on, so that they could go back to Munich and make better beer. And then at the end of the day, this guy, he was responsible for the invention of the Munich malt, which is kind of a darker caramel malt, as well as the Märzen style. So Oktoberfest, the Oktoberfest beer, and the Helles.
Wow.
The Helles.
It's like a movie script ready to be made.
100%. I would love to watch that movie.
Right.
But the Helles as a style was Germany's answer to the Czech Pilsner.
Pretty good answer, in my opinion.
I agree. I'm going to be brewing my Helles and bringing it back within the next week.
It's my wife's favorite beer that you guys make.
There you go. There you go. If you're in local to San Diego, or you're in Portland, or you're in Boise,
we'll be there this weekend.
Yeah, we're going to pick up some Barley and Sword beer, at our local liquor store while we're up there too. Mike, thanks so much again for coming on. I love following your journey. So happy that you're able to commit to this full time now, and just looking forward to the continued expansion and growth of the brand. barley&sword.com. Check it out. You can see their full menu there. You can go on Instagram. It's Barley and Sword, and check out their marketing efforts there that you talked about a little bit too. Mike, again, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. It's good to touch base with you again.
Yeah.
Of course. Thanks, man. All right. Thanks again to our guest today. That was Mike Howell. He is the founder and brewmaster of Barley and Sword Brewing Company here in San Diego. I've talked about him a bunch. I bring a lot of my visitors there as well. If you're a fan of just, original recipe, kind of European style beer, to the source, to the roots, like that's the place you want to go. It's a comfortable vibe. It's nothing that's no clubby, no loud music. You're gonna go there. You're really, really gonna enjoy the beer. You might learn something while you're there as well. So if you're ever in
we
San
liken
Diego,
it to dovetail, right? If you're in the
right,
Chicago area and you're out in San Diego and you like dovetails style, that's the spot to go to for
all
sure.
about the beer, right? No frills, like Mike said. So again, check them out, barley&sword.com or at barley&sword on socials. Evan, I got a quick question before we get out of here. Quick reaction. All right. Bulls traded Zach Levine. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to bring. I don't understand why, Sacramento wants to bring him and DeRozan back together. It didn't work here, but it might work for us. It's like that old meme. What is going on there? They had to get rid of Fox to do it. I don't know. I don't know from their perspective what the point of that was. The Bulls get their pick back. So it's if you're just looking, you see, oh, they get a first round. No, they just get their own first round pick back. So are they adding anything from this trade that they didn't have a few years ago? No. The direction of this was they tried to go for it with what they thought was enough. Probably, I don't know. That had to be what they were thinking, right? Vooch, DeMar, Zach, Lonzo Ball was the secret sauce, the recipe there. That just went up in flames, and then so now they're trying to claw back some picks here, get their own pick back, and probably tank the rest of the season. I don't know. I don't like the direction it's headed. I know I was listening to the radio today, and they played some clips of Nick Friedel, who's
eviscerated the front office.
He just eviscerated them. Said they were probably the worst front office. Gar Pax just runs circles around these guys, and it seems like they're going to get another opportunity here to overhaul this roster, which I don't think they deserve based on what they've done so far. I don't know. That's just my perspective and some of the things I've heard, like I said, and have talked about in the past. I don't watch a ton of Bulls basketball just because I don't like this roster, and I don't like it even more now than it was. So I think I'm still probably a couple of years away from being very invested in this team. I need a young superstar or a young star, somebody to get excited about. And I don't think
I got a name. I got a name for you. His name is Modest Buzelis.
Okay.
That is your young superstar to watch. 6'10", can handle it, dunks the crap out of the ball. You'll see him in the dunk contest at All-Star Weekend. He is the only kind of piece on that roster that you can get excited about. But that was our show. Thanks again to our guest, Mike Howell, for joining us. For Evan Bierman, I'm Dan Slowick. You've been listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You could find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com. And you can watch the show on YouTube. Just search up Domestic Draft and drop us a sub. Thanks again for listening. Cheers.
Cheers.